really excited to be joined today by Hassan El-Tayyab, who is a legislative director over at a kind of Quaker peace organization. Be a good way of describing FCNL. Is that right, Hassan?
Yeah, that's right. One of the oldest peace lobbies in the country, right here in Capitol Hill.
And also joined from Sana'a, Yemen, by Shuaib Almosawa, who is joining us by audio. Shuaib, thank you so much for being here.
Thanks for having me.
And Shuaib just wrote a terrific piece in The Intercept, which I would recommend everybody go check out after they watch this. But so Shuaib, can you tell us a little bit about about where we are now, and also as people in Yemen are watching the world's focus on Russia and Ukraine, are people wondering why it is that there's so much attention there and so little attention in Yemen, or is this just something that is understood to be the case at this point?
They have acknowledged that Ukraine is a totally different issue than Yemen, because they think Ukraine is their race maybe have played a part in catching the world attention into their suffering, while Yemen has been ignored mainly because it's Saudi Arabia and the US who are leading the war, and that's why the world doesn't care or give much attention to what's happening for the past 8 years.
And what are the day-to-day conditions there right now compared to, well, in general, but then also compared to, say, a year ago?
Yemen's situation has been worse all the time, but it's much worse now. And since Biden came, it's been a lot difficult for Yemenis to cope with their daily lives. And there is no fuel. The fuel has been the main driver of food insecurity across Yemen, and that's because since Biden came, Saudi, I don't know, maybe felt emboldened to tighten the blockade on fuel imports. But it's been the case since Biden came to office that fuel has been lower and lower, and there is no fuel at all. Sometimes stations that get their fuel from the company, they're running out of fuel, and there is almost 5 kilometers of cars lining up at fuel stations.
Hassan, what's the situation in Congress at this point? Last year, there was a battle, an attempt to get into a piece of legislation, into the NDAA, some type of binding language that would really hamstring Saudi Arabia's war effort. That fell short. There had been a decision not to push forward with a war powers resolution and instead to try this alternative approach. So, now that the groups are regrouping, so to speak, what's the next move?
Ryan, thank you so much for having me on. And I agree that Intercept article that Shuaib wrote is incredible and heartbreaking. We are approaching the 7th anniversary of the war on Saturday. And this is 7 years of US-enabled, Saudi-led coalition war and blockade that's pushed millions of people to the brink of famine, including millions of children. It's devastating. Since Biden came into office, we've seen an escalation of the Saudi war in Yemen, despite Biden promising that he would end all US participation. He couched it in the terms offensive, but we know that this ongoing support that's happening, whether you call it offensive or defensive, is enabling these Saudi aircraft. In September, we saw Congress pass through the House actually a NDAA provision to terminate intel sharing, logistical support, spare parts, and maintenance. Unfortunately, for the third time in 3 consecutive years, that same amendment was stripped out in conference negotiations between the House and Senate. So, obviously we have to keep going. Reps Pramila Jayapal and DeFazio in the House, they said in February in an op-ed they published in The Nation that they were going to introduce a new Yemen war powers resolution to end all this U.S. complicity in the war, including everything that was in the amendment that passed through the House. And that got 219 votes. So they are planning to introduce that around the 7th anniversary of the war, which I think you'll probably see it introduced in the next week or two, and receive floor consideration shortly after that.
And so, Shuaib, back in 2015 or so, when this war first started, I think people had a hope that this would be quick, that there were negotiations going on, that this would be used as leverage, and that there would be some type of a deal reached. And I don't think anybody expected at the time that 7 years later we'd still be Yemen would still be facing this crisis, would still be at war. What are people thinking now on the ground? Like how much hope do people have that there's any light at the end of this tunnel, to borrow a Vietnam phrase, that something, or that there might be a corner turned here? Or are people just assuming that this is a new reality until told otherwise?
People here have lost hope that the war is coming to an end anytime soon. And and I think it's mainly because the United States has refused or haven't been willing to put an end to this. Whether they're correct or not, that's what the majority of the people here think. It's a phone call. They said the US can end it in a phone call to the Saudi monarchs.
What does that assumption that the war is not going to end anytime soon, what does that do to daily life? Like, is life still going on, or are people just? I know that one reason that the world's not paying a lot of attention to Yemen is that the refugee crisis is an internal one rather than refugees pouring out into other countries. So how do people go about their lives just without any hope that this is going to end?
They have somehow adapted to the hardships they have been through for the past 7 years, and they're suffering. They're resorting to harsh coping measures to come about their daily lives, and it's been a lot difficult. But they're surviving, but not living, actually.
Mm-hmm. Hassan, what's your sense of what's holding the White House back from just making that phone call, and how much does it have to do with gas prices?
Yeah, I mean, that's a great question. There has been this US-Saudi partnership that's been going on for decades and decades, and it is because of fuel. And this, if anything, that this crisis in Ukraine, this crisis in Yemen shows that we desperately need to get off fossil fuels to be able to hold authoritarians accountable. US leadership in opposing Russia, looking at the war in Yemen, we're essentially supporting the Putin side of the war in Yemen, and supporting the Mohammed bin Salman, and now Biden is going hat in hand to Mohammed bin Salman to try to get him to stabilize world oil markets and to pump more fossil fuels. You just saw that the same roughly within a few days time of the US announcing that it was going to send more Patriot missile batteries to Saudi Arabia, that Saudi had agreed to produce more fossil fuels. So I mean, if this is not a quid pro quo, I don't know what is. And basically what the Saudis and the UAE made clear is that they wanted more military aid for their war in Yemen if they were going to keep the fossil fuel taps open.
And Shuaib, before this war broke out, Yemen was obviously not doing well, economically, but it had a middle class, it had a working class, it had its upper class. What is left of those kind of middle and upper class elements of Yemeni society 7 years into this war?
A lot have been damaged. I mean, a lot has of the middle class have suffered a lot. There is no salary for the past. The monthly salary for public servant have been cut for the past 6 years now, and that's a Saudi war tactic. It's been a lot worse for all society classes, but mainly the working class has been hit the worst. The worst.
Hassan, Shuaib, fortunately we have to leave it there, but thank you so much for joining us. Love to have you back again soon. And Hassan, best of luck with the legislation. Shuaib, best to you in Sana'a.